This is a plesiosaur, a very successful marine reptile that swam our oceans for more than 130 million years before disappearing along with the dinosaurs. I still remember the first time I saw this animal. My mind just couldn't understand how something like this could exist in reality. It was as if someone had stitched together the neck of a snake, the shell of a turtle, the flippers of a seal, and the miniature head of a crocodile, fusing them into one improbable animal. The result did not feel like a creature that should exist in nature. It felt like a mistake in anatomy. And strangely enough, early paleontologists shared that same sense of disbelief. When the first fossils were studied, this animal was so unlike anything familiar that its body almost refused to make sense. The proportions simply did not seem to belong together. The neck stretched far beyond what the body appeared able to support, while the limbs had flattened into paddles and the head looked strangely small at the end of it all. For a time, it was easier to imagine a mistake in reconstruction than accept that this was how the animal was actually built. Then came a discovery that deepened the mystery, a species named Albertinectes. It shared the classic plesiosaur body, but its neck defied belief. That neck alone was built from 76 vertebrae. For comparison, the human neck has 7, a giraffe's has 7. Almost every mammal on Earth has 7. Albertinectes had 76 vertebrae, forming a neck that stretched even longer than its own body. That leaves us with a very simple problem. How does an animal like this actually work? How does a marine reptile swim, hunt, breathe, and move through water when its neck is longer than the rest of its body? Because the strange thing is, plesiosaurs were not some failed evolutionary experiment. They were wildly successful. They spread through ancient oceans, evolved into many different forms, and survived almost the entire age of the dinosaurs. So how did they turn a body that looked impossible into one of the most successful designs the ocean ever produced? The obvious place to begin is the neck. When you first see a plesiosaur, it is the part that makes the animal look almost impossible. And for a long time, people thought they had a simple explanation for it. They thought the neck was a weapon. It was imagined as long and flexible, able to snake through the water with a small head at the end, striking before the rest of the body arrived. At first, that makes sense. Give an animal a neck like this, and it is easy to picture it working like a whip. It gives the strangest part of the body a clear purpose. But the bones show something different. When researchers examined the vertebrae and the joints between them, they found that the neck was relatively stiff. It could move, but not in the wild, twisting way shown in old paintings. Side-to-side movement was limited, with only a little more freedom up and down. This was not a neck built to lash through the water like a sea serpent. And that makes it harder to explain. A flexible neck at least feels useful, but a long, stiff neck creates drag and carries a small head far from the body. It seems to have evolved for reach rather than speed. From the prey's point of view, the large body stayed several meters away. What came close was only the small head. The neck allowed the plesiosaur to reach toward prey without bringing the rest of its body forward, and its stiffness may have helped keep that movement steady. Other clues support this idea. In some plesiosaurs, the eyes sit high on the skull, possibly helping them watch for prey against the brighter water above. Grooves in the roof of the mouth may also have drawn in water, allowing the animal to sense chemicals in its surroundings. The same neck may have helped with feeding along the seafloor. Some plesiosaurs have been found with clams, shellfish, and other bottom-dwelling animals inside them. They may have lowered the head to feed without dragging the entire body across the bottom. The truth is, the purpose of the long neck probably changed from one species to another. You see, plesiosaurs were around for more than 130 million years, and they evolved into many different species. A neck that helped one species catch fish may have helped another feed along the sea floor. But there is one more thing. The neck may not have been as fragile as those early drawings suggest. Artists were working mostly from the skeleton, so they gave plesiosaurs an impossibly thin neck. but a fossil preserving part of the body's outline suggests it was actually thicker, more muscular, and much stronger. But the neck was only the beginning. The rest of the animal was even harder to explain. Everyone notices the neck first. Look past it, though, and you start to realize just how completely these animals had committed to the water. Think about a sea turtle for a moment. It spends almost its whole life at sea, but every so often has to drag itself onto a beach to rest or bury its eggs in the sand. That's the pattern for nearly every reptile we know. However much time they spend in the water, the land always pulls them back. For a long time, people assumed plesiosaurs were the same. Then, a fossil found in 2011 showed they weren't. It was a plesiosaur called Polycotylus, and it had been preserved with a baby still inside it. The baby was large and already well developed, carried inside the mother's body. That means they gave birth in the open ocean, the way whales and dolphins do today. And once you can give birth at sea, there's really no reason left to ever come ashore. Looking at the rest of the skeleton, they probably couldn't have anyway. Their legs had become flippers, shaped for the water and useless for carrying weight on land. The body had gone broad and stiff, with heavy shoulders and hips to hold the muscles that drove those flippers. And the tail was short, barely involved in swimming at all. Everything pointed the same way, that this was an ocean animal, rebuilt from the inside out for a life it would never leave. The swimming is where plesiosaurs really go their own way. Most strong swimmers push themselves along with the tail. Fish do, whales do, and even the ichthyosaurs sharing these same seas ended up shaped almost exactly like dolphins for that reason. Plesiosaurs did none of that. They had 4 big flippers and hardly any tail to speak of. You wouldn't expect that to work very well, and yet it kept working for more than 130 million years. The way scientists picture it now, those flippers didn't really paddle at all. They worked more like wings. Instead of just shoving water backwards, they generated lift, sort of the way a bird's wing lifts it through the air. So, in a real sense, plesiosaurs were flying underwater. And the two pairs worked as a team. When researchers built robotic flippers and ran the flow models, they found the back pair riding the wake thrown off by the front pair, pulling a little extra efficiency out of every stroke. So the body that looks so clumsy standing in a museum was anything but clumsy once it was moving. It was built around a way of swimming that almost nothing else with a backbone has ever used. Even calling them reptiles sends your mind in the wrong direction. You picture something slow and cold, sitting on a rock, waiting for the sun to warm it up. Plesiosaurs were nothing like that. When scientists looked inside them, they found signs of rapid growth, far faster than we'd expect from a typical cold-blooded reptile. The chemistry locked inside their teeth points in the same direction. Their bodies stayed warmer than the water around them. And that matters because some of those seas were incredibly cold. Plesiosaur fossils have been found in what is now southern Australia, preserved alongside geological evidence that points to near-freezing conditions. These weren't reptiles hiding away in warm tropical lagoons. Some were swimming through waters cold enough to kill almost any reptile alive today. Now, that doesn't make them warm-blooded the way a mammal is. The evidence isn't strong enough to say that, and it's important to be honest about where the science stops. But one thing is clear. The old image of a slow, sluggish reptile drifting through a warm lagoon doesn't hold up anymore. Plesiosaurs had adapted to life in the open ocean, and it was anything but peaceful. To understand why they became so different, we have to look at the world around them. The Mesozoic seas had none of the big swimmers we'd recognize today. No whales, no dolphins, no seals or orcas. Those roles belonged to a completely different caste. Ichthyosaurs chased fish through the open water, marine crocodile relatives hunted closer to shore, and sharks and rays were spreading into more and more forms. Later on, the mosasaurs turned up as some of the largest predators the ocean had ever seen. The prey was changing too. Shells were getting thicker and defensive spines more common, so the hunters answered with stronger jaws and new ways of cracking through all that armor. Paleontologists call this long arms race the Mesozoic Marine Revolution. The ocean was getting more competitive, and plesiosaurs changed right along with it. Some kept the small head and long neck. Others went the opposite way entirely, growing enormous skulls, short necks, and jaws built to take on much bigger prey. We can see part of this history in their stomachs. Some plesiosaur fossils still hold the remains of their last meals. Fish bones, scales, the little hooks from squid-like belemnites, and now and then bits of ammonite. One Australian specimen, nicknamed Eric, was found with fish vertebrae inside him, along with a small collection of smooth, rounded stones. Those stones are called gastroliths, and they show up in a lot of plesiosaur fossils. We're still not sure what they were for. They might have helped grind up food in the stomach, or added a bit of ballast to keep the animal down in the water. Some were probably just swallowed by accident. But here's the interesting part. A few of them came from rock formations far from where the animal ended up buried, which hints that plesiosaurs sometimes traveled a very long way. And among the short-necked forms, the evidence gets a lot more violent. These are the ones we call pliosaurs. Huge skulls, thick teeth rooted deep in the jaw, a bite built for clamping down on big prey. Their teeth have left marks on the bones of other marine reptiles, so we know they weren't just picking off small fish. Some may even have twisted their whole bodies while biting down, tearing chunks off prey too big to swallow in one go. It looks a lot like the death roll a crocodile does, though the two aren't closely related. The long-necked species went about it more quietly. As we saw earlier, that small head may have let them drift in close before the rest of the animal was noticed. Their eyes were set up for seeing underwater, and some may have picked up chemical traces drifting through the water. They were hunting the same seas as the pliosaurs, just solving the problem in a completely different way. And sometimes, survival came down to more than hunting. Every so often during the Mesozoic, big stretches of ocean lost much of their oxygen. Volcanic activity and shifts in climate churned up the water, and a lot of fish and other gill breathers couldn't cope with what was left. Plesiosaurs still had to come up to the surface for air, and that turned out to be a quiet advantage. The oxygen in the water could fall without immediately cutting off their air supply. Their lungs had not evolved for these events. They were already there. But when the ocean changed, an adaptation built for one reason suddenly became useful for another. That was part of what made plesiosaurs so successful. They did not survive for more than 130 million years because one body worked everywhere. They survived because that body could keep changing as the ocean changed around it. Most people carry one image of a plesiosaur: a long neck, a small head, a broad body, and 4 flippers. Think of the Loch Ness shape drifting through a Jurassic Sea. That image is accurate for some species, but it represents only one part of a much larger group. Plesiosaurs survived for more than 130 million years, from the beginning of the Jurassic until the end of the Cretaceous. To put that into perspective, Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer to us than it did to the earliest plesiosaurs. And over that enormous stretch of time, their bodies changed in ways that made some species look almost unrelated to others. But their story had begun even earlier. Before true plesiosaurs appeared, the seas were home to animals called sauropterygians. Some, such as nothosaurs, were still partly tied to land. Their limbs could support them outside the water, and their bodies had not yet fully taken on the plesiosaur shape. Then, over time, later forms called pistosauroids moved further in that direction. Their trunks became stiffer, and their limbs began developing into the 4 large flippers that would eventually define plesiosaurs. And then, at the end of the Triassic, a major extinction swept through the oceans. Many marine groups disappeared, but early plesiosaurs survived. In the Jurassic seas that followed, they began spreading into the empty rolls left behind. And this is where the familiar body started moving in very different directions. Some early forms, such as the Romaleosaurids, became large predators with powerful heads. Elasmosaurids pushed the neck in the opposite direction, eventually producing animals like Albertonectes, whose neck was longer than the rest of its body. Plesiosaurids shortened the neck and enlarged the skull. In some species, the head became enormous, turning the animal into one of the dominant predators of its ocean. Others remained smaller. Leptocleidids lived closer to shore and possibly in colder waters, while polycotylids developed more streamlined bodies that may have helped them chase faster prey. They all kept the same basic four-flipper design. But around that framework, evolution produced animals built for very different lives. And even near the end of their history, plesiosaurs were still changing. Aristonectines lived during the final millions of years before the asteroid impact, including in the cold waters around Antarctica. They had broad, unusual skulls filled with many small teeth. Instead of attacking a few large animals, they may have fed on large numbers of smaller prey. It's the same problem baleen whales would later solve. The two aren't closely related, and Aristonectines had no baleen, but both needed a way to gather many small animals at once, and evolution tends to reach the same answer when the pressure is the same. Then, 66 million years ago, the asteroid struck. Plesiosaurs disappeared alongside mosasaurs, ammonites, non-avian dinosaurs, and much of the life in the oceans. Their extinction was not the result of a body that had stopped working. They were still diverse and still evolving near the end. But the impact changed the planet faster than large marine animals could adapt. And after more than 130 million years, the ocean that had shaped plesiosaurs was suddenly gone. But you see, there is a limit to all of this, and it is worth being honest about it. Nobody has ever seen a plesiosaur alive. Everything we have said about how it swam, how it hunted, how it raised its young, we have pieced together from broken skeletons and the chemistry trapped inside old bone. The picture we have is real, but it is a reconstruction, and reconstructions get corrected. They always have. When Mary Anning pulled the first near-complete skeleton out of the cliffs at Lyme Regis, even the great Georges Cuvier assumed she had faked it, that bones from different animals had been stitched together into something that couldn't be real. He was wrong. The animal was exactly that strange. And almost every version of the plesiosaur since then has been someone correcting the version that came before. But some things the stone simply will not give back. We don't know what color they were. We don't know what sounds they made, if they made any. We don't know whether they traveled alone or together, whether they cared for their young after birth, or what the world looked like through those eyes set high on the skull. Some of that is gone for good, and no better microscope is going to recover it. That isn't a failure of the science. It's just the honest shape of what a fossil can tell you. A fossil is not the animal. It's a piece of the animal, pressed into rock and carried across 100 million years. And we are lucky to have even that much. And maybe that missing piece is exactly why the plesiosaur never really left us. Because we did fill the gap. That long neck rising out of dark water became the shape we handed to lake monsters and sea serpents, the silhouette people still swear they see breaking the surface of a cold Scottish loch. We took the parts we couldn't explain and built a legend out of them. We invented a monster because we thought the truth would be smaller. It wasn't.